What it do, YouTube? Your boy LTD back with another video, and today I'm finna be checking out the best WrestleManias ever by Wrestling with Andy. Make sure y'all go subscribe to him. And yeah, man, there's been plenty of great WrestleManias. There's been plenty of great ones. There's been plenty of mid ones, and there's been plenty of mediocre ones. But on the top of my head, the best WrestleManias I could think of is obviously WrestleMania 17. WrestleMania 40, WrestleMania 30, and WrestleMania 19. Those are some of my favorite WrestleManias ever, and I hope they'll be on the list. And yeah, man, this is gonna be an interesting video. But without further ado, let's chill and relax, and let's get started. This should be an interesting one. Hold on, let me go subscribe to Wrestling with Andy, and let's get started.
Over the years, there has been one show which has stood out above all the premier events on the WWE calendar. And to the surprise of no one, that event is WrestleMania. But given we now have 41 editions of the Showcase of the Immortals to choose from, it can be hard to narrow down the best of the best. That said, we've managed to do exactly this for you today. So join us now as we look at those shows right now, starting with our earliest iteration, WrestleMania 3.
All the way back.
Sure, WrestleMania 1
way
may
before
have
my
been the
time.
one which set the template for what the event would become, but it was WrestleMania 3 which took things to another level again, as that was the show where, for the first time, the Showcase of the Immortals moved to a stadium setting. And boy did it go hard in doing so, as the Pontiac Silverdome on that evening in 1987 would be packed to the rafters with a staggering 78,000 people being in attendance. Obviously then, this created a visual unlike anything which had ever been seen at a wrestling show before, and which has rarely been seen since. Hell, even to this day, that attendance remains iconic.
Huge as hell.
What were the fans who showed up in Detroit that evening treated to?
Hey,
well, aside from the once-in-a-lifetime
shout out to the Motor City
main event that was Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant, there would also be the show-stealing performance from Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. Yes, what you had here was everything you could ever need, as if the spectacle in the main event didn't do it for you, then the athleticism of the Intercontinental title bout sure would have. Sure, the rest of the card might not have been the most noteworthy, as was so often the case with the early WrestleManias, but in spite of lower card showdowns like Billy Jack Haynes vs. Hercules, multiple 6-man tag matches, and a sub 7-minute hair versus hair match pitting Rowdy Roddy Piper against Adrian Adonis not being great, the two main events alone are so historic that they're more than enough to make Mania 3 the first truly great edition of the show. Honestly, if we're talking about WrestleMania moments, then there might still not be anything that compares to the Hulkster body slamming Andre the Giant at the end of their showdown,
infamous
even this
moment.
many years on, as it's that image which has been burned into the mind of any WWE fan over time. And rightfully so, because for a large part of the company's history, this was the most famous scene it ever created. But it wouldn't be the last time WWE ever had an iconic Showcase of the Immortals. No, there would be plenty more as the year carried on, with the next one we want to look at today being the 10th anniversary, the one appropriately named
another one way
WrestleMania
before my
10.
time.
What made WrestleMania 10 so special? Well, during a time when WWF was starting to fall into a recession of public interest as the combination of the steroid trial and the Ring Boy scandal did a number on its public image, this was exactly what they needed in order to keep things afloat, as after 10 years, we finally got a great Mania from top to bottom. Sure, it might have been the first one without Hulk Hogan there, but that was more than made up for with a whole new roster of stars who were ready to rise to the forefront and spearhead the burgeoning new generation era. Who were these stars? Well, the most notable one would be Bret Hart, someone who began the evening by losing clean to his younger brother Owen in a true 5-star mat classic, but
I know
would
what
later
WrestleMania
redeem himself by going on to the main event to defeat Yokozuna for the WWF title.
Yeah, this was a great moment right here.
Of the Hitman was the thread.
Yeah, that moment right there, even though it was way before my time, this was a great moment. This was basically like the Daniel Bryan Cody Rhodes moment before those actual moments. Like Bret Hart finally, I believe, having that great moment beating Yokozuna to become WWF champion. Everybody came down there to celebrate. Yeah, that was a great moment. I ain't gonna lie. All the baby faces
holding this entire event together, and it made everything feel like a cohesive whole by the time it was over. But it wasn't just Bret who was shining here. No, there was always the yin to his yang in many ways, Shawn Michaels stepping into the spotlight. And we say that because WrestleMania 10 was the night where, right in front of a packed Madison Square Garden crowd, he'd wow the audience with his iconic ladder match against Razor Ramon. Needless to say then, with this being about unlike anything WWF audiences had seen before, it made for a truly memorable scene, one which would spark a whole new match type for the company going forward. Yes, there were lowlights to Mania 10 as well, lowlights like Earthquake versus Atom Bomb or Yokozuna's first title defense of the evening against Lex Luger. But these were only minor faults in what was otherwise easily the best version of the show Vince McMahon had put on at that point in time. Once it was over though, WWF would truly enter its dark period as the new generation era saw business crater to the point the promotion almost went out of business. Thankfully then, things would turn around in 1998, as that was when we got our next entry for the list of greatest WrestleManias ever, WrestleMania 14. Now, it's important to place this one in context because while there may have been better Manias over the years...
the start of the Attitude Era. The start of the Austin Era.
Perhaps none were as important as this one outside of the first iteration. And the reason we say that is because mere months prior to it happening, Vince McMahon was on the verge of having to close up shop as Raw was about to be kicked off of the USA Network. What happened to turn things around then? Well, Stone Cold Steve Austin happened. And once the rattlesnake caught fire, business started turning around fast, especially when it became clear WrestleMania 14 was going to serve as his coronation night. That's right, it was at this show that after beating Shawn Michaels in the main event, Austin would be left standing tall as the new WWF champion. And because Mike Tyson was the special guest enforcer for that bout, it meant a whole new audience got a chance to see the Texan do his thing here.
This was so great, man. So great. They were doing whatever it takes to beat WCW in the Monday Night Wars. Like, literally. Because they were on verge of going out of business. But this moment right here really saved it. Like, dead ass. It really saved it.
As you would expect then, this fully sparked the boom period for the promotion that was the Attitude Era and led them toward the greatest commercial success they've ever had to this day. But it wasn't just Steve Austin's ascension which made WrestleMania 14 so great. No, there was also a fantastic undercard which featured a number of other stars to draw new fans in, with this being evident in bouts like The Rock versus Ken Shamrock, the New Age Outlaws versus Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, and the long-anticipated first-time showdown between The Undertaker and Kane. That's right, here is where the company hit a complete home run exactly when they needed to. And as a result of that, they entered a new age of prosperity which is still paying off to this day. That said, while this might have marked the start of the Attitude Era, it wouldn't be the peak of the whole time period. No, that would come a few years later on a night which is generally regarded to be the end of the turn of the millennium boom. And this show is the one we want to look at next as it happens, arguably the greatest WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17.
Yep, I just called it. I said this earlier. This has the case to be arguably the greatest WrestleMania ever. It was just stacked from top to bottom. The TLC match, obviously Rock versus Austin, Undertaker versus Triple H. Man, this match was so good. Even though this was before my time as well, I actually watched this pay-per-view. This was so great. You can make the case this is arguably the best WrestleMania ever. Like, dead ass, bro, on some real shit.
Not only is this probably the greatest WrestleMania of all time, if you were to poll 100 wrestling fans and ask them for their opinions on the matter, there's a good chance the majority would say this is the greatest pay-per-view full stop. So packed was it with classic matches and moments wall to wall. After all, it was the night where everything that was great about the Attitude Era was represented in some form. And so, as a result of that, it felt like a celebration of a time which was about to come to an end. What were some of the highlights on the card specifically that night? Well, things would get kicked off very strong with not just a very good singles bout between Chris Jericho and William Regal over the Intercontinental Championship, but also maybe the best hardcore title bout ever, the one which pitted Kane, The Big Show, and Raven all against one another. Then, once that was over, the peaks would only continue as we got showdowns like Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit, Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon, The Undertaker versus Triple H, and in one of the best wrestling matches ever, Edge and Christian getting the better of the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys in TLC 2.
Iconic moment right there.
Of course, for as great as all these matches were though, the real selling point of WrestleMania 17 was the main event for the WWF title, the one which pitted Steve Austin and The Rock against one another. Going in, it was clear there could only be one ace of the Attitude Era, and it felt like this match would decide who that was. Unfortunately, though, in the process of winning the bout which followed, the Rattlesnake would turn heel by aligning himself with Vince McMahon.
Not many two
And
people
as
are
a
a
result
fan of that.
regretful move, the boom period would end almost overnight. Still though, even if it ended on a low note, this remains one of the best wrestling shows you're ever going to see. Maybe
Oh yeah,
the
without
best,
question.
in fact. And that's not just rose-colored glasses either, as this one has aged like a fine wine. But what if we jump forward a couple of years to find another show which was, in many ways, just as good? Well, that would be our next entry, a show which never fully got the credit it deserved, but which is also a classic in its own right, WrestleMania 19. Sure,
this was a
the
good one
Attitude Era
too.
might have well and truly been over by then, but Mania 19 was a clear sign that the WWE was still going to be able to thrive during a down period, as what they gave us in Seattle that evening was nothing short of spectacular. Again, there's an argument to be made that from a quality perspective, this was even better than WrestleMania 17. Why do we say that? Well, just look at the card as it featured mid-card highlights like Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon having their one and only in-ring showdown, as well as a work rate classic in the form of Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels. Then, of course, there were the two main events, the first of which saw Steve Austin and The Rock complete their WrestleMania trilogy, this time with the Great One going over. We didn't know it at the time, but this would end up serving as the Rattlesnake's retirement bout, with him not entering a ring again until he did so for one night only at WrestleMania 38 almost 2 decades later. That would have been enough to elevate this event to the level of legend alone, but there was still more to come, as the final bout of the evening saw Kurt Angle have a
this
dream
match right here was
Brock
great as
Lesnar
well.
over the undisputed title.
Classic
this one
match.
almost ended in disaster after the Beast damn near broke his neck during a botched shooting star press. But things were
not gonna lie, for somebody that size to do that, a whole shooting star press and damn near broke his damn neck. Man, Brock was so lucky that he didn't break his neck, like for real. That was a nasty fall.
Able to recover for long enough for him to get the win, and that ended up putting the capper on what truly might be the most undervalued WrestleMania of all time. Hell, the fact it did so poorly at the box office is a crime, as it sent the wrong message to WWE bosses and told them that what they were doing here wasn't working, when in truth, it very much was. That said, there would be no such issues with drawing when it comes to our next entry for one of the greatest WrestleManias ever, the one which came 1 year later and which put things back on track again
20.
from a business perspective,
great one too.
WrestleMania 20. Why did this one draw so well? Well, there was an added interest point in it being the 20th anniversary of the Showcase of the Immortals. And as was tradition at this point in time, it meant it would be held in the spiritual home of WWE, Madison Square Garden.
The city that never sleeps. You already know they're going to make a lot of money off of this.
Overall, compared to the Attitude Era, you wouldn't have known that from watching the show, as with the iconic arena packed out to the rafters with an absolutely rabid New York audience, wrestling felt like the hottest thing in the world again, for a few hours at least. But what would those fans be treated to here? Well, in keeping with the idea of it being a special anniversary edition, Vince McMahon would go all out by putting every star he could get his hands on the card. And that meant things kicking off with the soon-to-be ace of the company, John Cena, scoring a big win over the Big Show.
His first
but
major
this would
title.
be far from all the undercard had to offer at Mania 20, as once that was done, we'd get things like Dwayne Johnson's last wrestling match in almost a decade during Evolution versus the Rock and Sock Connection. Yes, it's true that Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg stunk out the joint, as with it leaking ahead of time that both men were leaving WWE, the fans would turn on the entire thing. But the three closers...
fans didn't care. They found out that both of them were leaving. He was like, fuck both of y'all. We don't care about this match anymore.
More than made up for this, as they'd see Eddie Guerrero retain his WWE title against Kurt Angle, The Undertaker return to his dead man guys to once again take on his kayfabe brother Kane, and in a now redacted main event, Chris Benoit win the...
This match right here, instant classic. One of my favorite matches ever at WrestleMania. Even though this match is kind of forgotten due to you know what, this was still a great match. Like for real, great match. It's a shame that it's never going to be mentioned like that ever again.
World Heavyweight title after beating both Triple H and Shawn Michaels. So good was this main event, in fact, even if it's now been all but erased from history for obvious reasons, it still stands as something many fans choose to go back and watch regularly. Perhaps more than anything else, however, the real star here was that crowd, as with them being packed into the world's most famous arena, there was no way the atmosphere wasn't going to be crazy here in the Garden. And that makes it an even bigger deal in hindsight because this would be the last time the Showcase of the Immortals ever went to that venue. No, from here on in, it would be all stadium shows, all except for our next entry, that is, the underrated iteration that is WrestleMania 22.
Big time.
This is a WrestleMania which doesn't often top lists when people talk about their favorite version of all time, but it should be high up there, as in many ways, it was something of a sleeper. Just go back and look at the card and you'll see things such as Rey Mysterio completing his underdog story by winning the World Heavyweight title during a three-way, pitting him against Randy Orton and Kurt Angle.
The ultimate
and
underdog.
If that isn't enough, there's also the fact that Mania 22 gave us one of the earlier incarnations of the Money in the Bank ladder match, one which saw Rob Van Dam come out the winner after outlasting Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, Ric Flair, Finlay, and Matt Hardy. Still not convinced WrestleMania 22 is a hidden gem? How about the fact it was here that Mick Foley finally got his WrestleMania moment when he took on Edge midway through the show, and in the process
match of the
had
night,
one of
for
his
real,
best
for real.
matches ever, the one which ended him taking a spear through a flaming table. Then, of course, there was Shawn Michaels' memorable bout with Vince McMahon, that in a main event which saw John Cena overcome the growing Boo Birds to retain his WWE title against Triple H. All of this is to say that while it might not have the prestige of a WrestleMania 17, the spectacle of a WrestleMania 3, or the historical significance of a WrestleMania 14, Mania 22 is not one to sleep on if you're going back and doing a rewatch. Hell, even the women showed up here, something which was a rarity for the time period.
As a decade
before the company's women's revolution took effect, Mickie James and Trish Stratus absolutely tore the house down in a showing which only further proved just how much the incoming Canadian champion had improved in such a short space of time. Unfortunately, though, by the time our next entry for one of the greatest WrestleManias ever came around, the ladies would not get the opportunity to have such a strong showing. That said, it remains a very noteworthy edition of the Showcase of the Immortals anyway, so let's look at it right now. WrestleMania 25. Now again, this is
another
one
good
which
show.
might not necessarily come to mind when people talk about the best WrestleManias ever, but it does deserve to be in the discussion at least because while it might not have had the same wall-to-wall quality as Manias 10, 17, or 19, its highs were very high. In fact, its highs were so high, they gave us a contender for best match WWE ever put on, the first showdown on the grandest stage of the
classic match right here. I will never forget about this match. Arguably the best match at WrestleMania history. HBK, Undertaker, their first match, instant classic, man. This match will always give me goosebumps. Like, for real. Especially with JR on commentary. Man, this was so good.
All between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Really, with about this good being here, the rest of the show could have sucked and it would have still been worth watching. Thankfully then, this wasn't the only good thing at the 25th anniversary of the Showcase of the Immortals, as there were plenty of other things to enjoy too. Come on now, it was here that Ricky Steamboat came out of retirement and proved that he still had it after all these years when he teamed up with Superfly Jimmy Snuka and Rowdy Roddy Piper to take on Chris Jericho. And it was also here that for the second year in a row, CM Punk won the Money in the Bank ladder match, with this only further pushing him toward the level of superstardom that he was soon to reach. Then, as if that wasn't enough, there was the underrated World Heavyweight title bout between Edge, The Big Show, and eventual winner, John Cena.
John Cena had both of them on his shoulders.
Here too. Stinkers such as Tina Morella winning the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal, or Matt and Jeff Hardy dropping the ball during their Extreme Rules match. And the less said about the main event WWE title showdown between Triple H and Randy Orton, the better. That said, there was enough good to overcome this, with that Shawn Michaels Undertaker match still being something that stands up good to over.
Yeah, this match right here, it was pretty disappointing. Even though they just followed up the whole HBK and Undertaker match, everybody was basically fatigued because everybody was just losing their damn minds. But yeah, man, this match right here, it didn't live up to the expectations. Great build, but the match was a little suspect. This should have been a Hell in a Cell match or no holds barred match. This feud was so damn personal. Like, it was no longer about the championship. This was personal. This should have been a no holds barred match or something. Not no regular match. That really just kind of killed the whole match quality.
Overcome this, with that Shawn Michaels Undertaker match still being something that stands up to this day as a true 5-star classic if there ever was one. Really, it seems like a given that this would be considered the greatest streak match ever, but then there are some which have come pretty close to it in terms of quality in the years since, one of which would happen at our next entry for one of the greatest WrestleManias ever, the supposed once-in-a-lifetime evening that was WrestleMania 28. That's right, what we got here was a show
once
where,
in
an
lifetime.
attempt to take his mighty streak to 20-0, The Undertaker accepted the challenge of Triple H for a third time.
Another great streak. And not gonna lie, bro, I was on my feet for this match. I really thought the streak was over. As soon as Shawn Michaels hit Undertaker with the sweet chin music, then Triple H hit Undertaker with the pedigree, I thought it was over. Like, for real. Like, I even lost my damn voice. I was like, the streak is over. But nah, Undertaker still found a way to survive and keep the streak alive.
This time inside of Hell in a Cell. And that wasn't the only hurdle in his way here. No, there was also the fact that Shawn Michaels, the man he'd retired only a couple of years prior, was playing the role of special guest referee. Needless to say then, what followed was an absolute classic, as fans never came closer to believing the dead man could actually lose on the grandest stage of them all. Of course, by the time all was said and done though, The Undertaker would be standing victorious, with this in many ways marking the end of an era indeed, as it would be the last time all three of these
or so we thought.
men stood in the ring together in such a manner. But even more so than The Undertaker's final Mania showdown with Triple H, what WrestleMania 28 is most known for today is being the show in which, after a year of build, The Rock finally returned to the ring to take on John Cena one-on-one in a dream
Once in
match.
a lifetime.
A dream match which
this was good
at the
though.
time
This was
being
good.
billed as once in a lifetime. And while we all know now that this would not be the case as the rematch happened a year later, at the time, it truly did feel like a special moment which could never be recreated.
Yeah, it was. Great match
Which
between
ended
those
with
two.
the great one surprising a lot of people by coming out on top. Honestly, so big were each of these matches, they were enough to make Mania 28 a memorable one, even if there wasn't a huge amount of other notable moments on the card. Hell, the main event in particular would be enough to draw WWE's biggest ever pay-per-view buy rate. Once it was over,
That's
then,
crazy.
we'd have to wait 2 years until we got another show this large in scale. That's right, it's time for us to talk about WrestleMania 30.
Yep.
Now, WrestleMania
I
30,
called it.
in many ways, marked the start of a new era for WWE, one which could be considered the modern era we're still in today. And the reason we say that is because it's the show where older acts like John Cena, Randy Orton, and The Undertaker started to take a back seat. Sure,
Yeah.
they would still be present, but they wouldn't be the main focus anymore. No, that mantle would instead pass over to up-and-coming acts like The Shield or Bray Wyatt in the undercard, and to Daniel Bryan.
Even though Bray lost the match, he should have won. Yeah, the match against John Cena. Yeah, Bray should have won that match against John, without question. He shouldn't
in the
have
main
lost.
event. Yes, if there's one thing WrestleMania 30 is memorable for today, it's for being the peak of the Yes Movement, as this was the show where, similar to how Bret Hart's situation had played out at WrestleMania 10, the American Dragon pulled double duty, and for him that meant beating Triple H in the opener, and then going on to the final bout of the evening, where he bested both Randy Orton and Dave Batista to become the WWE World Heavyweight
such
Champion.
a great moment,
Of course,
man.
if there are two
Take
things
me
this show
back.
is known for, however, then it would be the fact that aside from Bryan winning the big one, it was also the night where The Undertaker's near quarter-century win streak on the grandest stage of them all came to an end. Obviously,
Even though I
then,
think
when
Brock
this
didn't
happened,
need
it was
it.
a huge shock to everyone watching, with the packed-out crowd in the Superdome here being left in stunned silence when Brock Lesnar hit his third F5 and got the 3 count.
Yeah, Brock didn't need the win. Like, he was already a made guy. He was already established. He did not need to end the streak. The person that should have ended the streak was supposed to be an up-and-coming superstar, like a Roman Reigns or a Bray Wyatt. They would have been perfect enough to break the streak. Like, for real. Brock did not need to break the streak.
The only thing it could be compared to, in fact, is the time when, after nearly 8 years of being on top of the WWF, Bruno Sammartino dropped his world title to Ivan Koloff in 1971. Could anything make this same level of history in future WrestleManias? Well, there would be one night where WWE was able to do this, and that night would come during our next entry, WrestleMania 35.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we're really getting into more modern WrestleManias now, and as anyone who was around at the time will remember, this was a mammoth show, with it clocking in at 7 hours in length by the time all was said and done. So long would it be, in fact, it would lead to the event being split into 2 nights in the years following. As you would expect then, this means it's probably the biggest Mania we're ever going to get in that sense, and that's why it was fitting it would make history in 2 very different ways during 2 of its world title matches. That's right. Well, there was plenty on the undercard here, which still stands out to this day. Things like Dave Bautista and Kurt Angle both having their retirement bouts. What's most memorable about WrestleMania 35 is that, firstly, it was the night Kofi Mania reached its peak, and after a meteoric rise to the top of the card, lifetime mid-carder Kofi Kingston became the first African-born star
Such
to
a
win
great
the belt
moment
with
right
the
here.
lineage which went all the way back to
Great
George
moment.
Hackenschmidt. Then, of course, there's the other big moment which happened here, the first ever women's main event for the Showcase of the Immortals, a groundbreaking scene which saw Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey both fall to the mighty Becky Lynch as the man became the undisputed women's champion. And what made that latter moment even more special was that it wasn't a token scene. No, this was the year where the women truly did deserve to go on last, as back then, Lynch was easily the biggest star in all of WWE. So when she came out victorious to close out the evening, it felt like something titanic had shifted within the fabric of the company. But let's move forward a little bit more now, as what we're going to get to next represents the start of the then still Vince McMahon-owned promotion's recent hot streak. A hot streak which would completely turn the tides of the modern-day wrestling war. What are we talking about here? Why, WrestleMania 39, of course.
This is a good one as well.
WrestleMania 39, what a turning point this moment
Especially
was.
night one.
Come on now.
So elite.
After what felt like decades of WWE being on a slow decline in terms of popularity, this was the night where it felt like the tide truly had turned and that the WWE was back on top again. Why was that? Well, a big part of the reason was because, while he wasn't fully gone from the company yet, Vince McMahon had pretty much moved away from booking what was happening on screen. So as a result of this, the product felt a lot fresher than it had in years, with Triple H now at the helm. And this was clearly apparent with the card the game gave us here. A card which provided highlights such as Rey Mysterio versus Dominic Mysterio, Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair for the SmackDown Women's.
This was such a great match too. Such a great match. Rhea versus Charlotte, so good.
Title, and an in-ring banger pitting
another
Gunther,
classic
Drew McIntyre,
match,
and Sheamus against one another with the Intercontinental
hard
title
hitting match too.
That said, the real big story of this show was the fact that after Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn beat the Usos for the undisputed tag team titles,
night one was so good.
It felt very much like the Bloodline saga was reaching its climax. As we all know now, though, this was not the way things would play out. No, when Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns stepped into the ring for the Night 2 main event, it would be the Tribal Chief who retained. A scene which came as a huge shock to everyone watching, as it felt like the company had dropped the ball big time. Thankfully then, this would not be the case, as by the time our next entry for one of the best WrestleManias came around, we'd see the true end of the story. What are we talking about this time? What else but WrestleMania 40? Really, this is the one which served as the high watermark of WWE's current hot streak, as from both a critical and business perspective, it was a blow-away success. But then how could it not be when it was the event in which Cody Rhodes finally finished his story to win the undisputed WWE Universal
Such a beautiful
title
moment,
Roman
man.
Reigns after a 1,316-day long reign from the champ. Of course, it wouldn't be an easy journey for the challenger.
So good,
before
man.
He won on
WWE had it
all.
all.
On night one, when he and Seth Rollins lost to the Bloodline Collective of the Tribal Chief and the new Final Boss version of The Rock. Once he bounced back from that, however, the American Nightmare
one of the
would
best
end up coming
builds
out
ever.
on top. And that would leave the vibes amongst the fan base feeling higher than they had since the early 2000s. But then it wasn't just Cody's big win which did this. No, there were plenty of other great moments at Mania 40 across both nights. Moments like Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch damn near stealing the show in the Women's World title bout, Sami Zayn ending Gunther's record-breaking run as Intercontinental Champion,
was good too.
and Damian Priest cashing in his Money in the Bank contract to steal the World Heavyweight title away from Drew McIntyre mere moments after the Scotsman won it himself. Yes, this is a WrestleMania for the ages, and it's rightfully the one which people will think of first when they go back and look at this current era retrospectively, as it's, to today's time, what WrestleMania 17 was to the Attitude Era, WrestleMania 3 was to the Golden Era, or WrestleMania 10 was to the New Generation Era, the peak of the whole thing. The only question we have at this point is, will there ever be another WrestleMania in the future which can match this level again? Something which can also earn itself a spot on a similar video to this in the future. We've no doubt that'll happen, and one thing is for sure, and this is that with there being so many classic versions of the show, the Showcase of the Immortals is going to be around for a long time yet, plenty of time to give us many more highlights.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's unlikely that we'll ever get an elite mania like WrestleMania 40. Like, for real. Let me go ahead and give this video a like. Yeah, man, this was a dope video, man. This took me a long way back, man. This gave me some huge nostalgia. Like, dead ass, man. I even named all the manias in the beginning of the video. 40, 30, 19, and 17. Like, those were some great ones. 20 as well was so good. Yeah, man, this was a dope video. Even though WrestleMania season has been kind of disappointing because Oba and Brock has really been carrying this whole WrestleMania build. But yeah, man, WrestleMania 40, they had it all, man. They really had it all. It's really hard to replicate that. But comment down below what y'all think about this video. And give me y'all favorite WrestleManias in the comment section down below. Make sure y'all hit that like button. Make sure y'all subscribe to my channel. This your boy LTD signing out. Peace.